Hey, what's up, guys? Episode 362 of Richard Metal Fan Interviews, calling from Zoom, and I'm here with Evan Sammons from Last Chance to Reason. How you doing today, Evan?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Bad, just on my lunch break, and I'm glad to be able to talk with you. So, kind of the format of the show is I want to talk about like your musical history and do a rundown of the discography, but take me back to young Evan. So, growing up in Maine, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to start playing the drums?
Um, Early on, I guess I was in the new metal era, so like Korn and Deftones and then Slipknot and stuff like that was the early stuff that I got into for heavy music. And then it became like the more extreme and technical stuff, whether it was like, Demu Borgir or Dream Theater or Meshuggah, Dillinger Escape Plan, all that stuff came pretty
All
quick.
good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then tell me about like forming the band because the band formed in 2004. So how'd you get to know everybody in the band?
Um, Chris, our bass player, was in bands that were also local bands when we were in high school. So I think sometimes our bands played together, and he didn't live too far away. He was just like a town or two over. Um, AJ, I met through another guy who was playing guitar with us named Dustin Fairbanks, and he was going to University of Maine in Augusta for music. So they were both studying music. So we met that way. And we had a few different singers at the beginning. And again, Mike Lassard was in local bands. Everybody always thought he was like the best singer. We loved his vocals. So he ended up in the band eventually.
Yeah. And then I guess you sort of played around like Maine and sort of like the New England area, and then you got signed to your first label, Abaddon Records, and you put out your the EP, Dreamt of an Angel Woke with a Nightmare. So how did, for I guess the first two parts, like how did Records find Last Chance to Reason and sort of like the recording process for that first EP?
I think we basically booked that studio time ourselves and just kind of like a lot of young bands, especially at the time, there wasn't a ton of self-recording or a lot of studios around. So we just kind of found a studio that like sounded decent to us and made it happen. And Abaddon, I'm not even actually sure how to pronounce that anymore. Abaddon or Abaddon, one of
I say it Abaddon.
that was a guy named Dave Davis, I believe, who worked at the Cave, or he worked closely with Kathy at the Cave, which was a venue we played a lot. And he just kind of was helping out uh, bands around the New England area by helping them with the cost of printing the CDs and trying to give them a little bit of a leg up. And probably if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't have taken ourselves as seriously as we did. That did help us get out there and give us a little boost in the early days.
Yeah. Yeah, and hard to believe that this year does mark 20 years since the first EP. Like, being as it has been like 20 years, do you have like a different viewpoint about it now as opposed to when you first put it out?
Well, I'm I'm sure I hadn't thought about it, how it's been 20 years for that at all. That's crazy. I don't know. It's we're definitely much more in the kind of like I said about Meshuggah, and I think we were really into Dillinger Escape Plan at that time. So the stuff isn't really as melodic as we became
Pretty
later.
chaotic.
Yeah, it's more chaotic. Yeah, it's but some of those songs started as prog gear songs, and then we really stripped them down and made them shorter and just kind of more dissonant and crazy. So in a way, it's like we can kind of came full circle and had some of those more traditional proggy elements later in our career that we stripped away at the time to have the more chaotic sound.
Yeah, and even like the song titles are great, like "Love Letter from a Dead Man," "Man," "Black, White, and Red all over. Even "Somewhere Between the Bedroom and the Abortion Clinic." That's a hell of a song title. And I know that was also like your y'all's first music video. So tell me about like that song.
Um, that's definitely one of those ones that might be the best example of the stuff that's more kind of dissonant and crazy and um has that Dillinger Escape Plan influence. Um, that was one of the ones that everybody liked live. It probably was partly because of the music video. I think that the mix of that one sounded like the best out of everything on that EP. For whatever reason, that one just sounded really good compared to all the rest of the stuff. Um, yeah, that's
Yeah.
our singer at the time, Mike Levenseller, wrote the lyrics and came up with those song titles. So, he was a kind of a childhood friend of mine, and um, yeah, I don't know. That was a good time. Like it was just having fun. We did a lot of like regional touring and probably even I think we got even as far as Florida on some of that stuff, like did the whole East Coast, but it was all just self-booked and, you know, really just young dudes just having fun playing that stuff.
Nice. And then going into like your first full-length album, Level One, I thought it was a pretty good album. So what was sort of like the mindset being it was sort of like the debut full-length Last Chance to Reason album?
Well, I think what even made us want to do that, this is funny because it's such a different world, but the MySpace and all that stuff was fairly new. So like being able to follow producers that you liked and bands that you liked seemed really unique and exciting. And I think Jamie King actually uh added us on MySpace. He was probably just adding like any band that was metal and like just mass adding people. But we're like, oh man, it's Jamie King. He did the Between the Buried and Me records and he's done all this cool stuff. And I just sent him a message and like he was like open to working with us based on the stuff that he heard. And I think that made us be like, oh wow, it's like this is gonna be a big step up for us. We should take this seriously. And we did a bunch of demoing out of everything and um, that started to solidify the sound of the band and going into more of that kind of video gamey themed direction. And we had a different singer at the time then too. So this was still before Michael Lassard joined the band. So there was no melodic singing on Level One. It's all very heavy and uh, kind of very Meshuggah influenced and um,
Yeah. Yeah. Even I know like this like it's pretty much all based on Super Metroid. Even like the album artwork looked like the character almost looks like Samus Aran. Like were y'all like fans of the video games at the time?
Yeah, I think part of that was Jamie King while we were recording too would say like this sounds like Metroid or something, and we hadn't really maybe even thought of it, but I mean, especially Chris and I think we played a lot of video games growing up, and I really like the Metroid series is one of my favorite series for sure. So that just kind of like started to come in to the picture more then, and then we just tried to fully embrace it and go in that direction.
Nice. Nice. And next up is Level Two. I thought it was a pretty good album because usually with the debut full-length album, you have like your entire life to write, and there was hype with that first album. When it came to making Level Two, did you felt like pressure to follow up Level One?
I think we put for whatever reason that almost felt like that was like the real debut for the band. It was Level Two. I mean, that's when we picked up a lot more steam and but I don't know if it was just the time in our lives that was or what it was, but we really were just like, okay, we're not messing around anymore. We're gonna try to like put out an album that is not only something that we can just be proud of, but we tried to make it stand up with like our favorite albums in general. We tried to like, make something and take seriously the challenge of making something that was, up there with our favorite like concept albums, like be it, Dream Theater Scenes from a Memory or uh, you know, the classic Opeth albums like Blackwater
Yeah.
Park or things. We
All
just
great albums.
hard as we could. And I think a lot of it had to do with Mike Lassard joining the band that we were like, okay, we got a guy who can really sing. So nothing's holding us back from doing whatever we want to do musically.
Yeah, pretty much like open like the doors for like new ideas.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd never felt that kind of freedom before. So it was, and I think the experience of recording with Jamie too showed us that we could, uh, push ourselves further. And it wasn't like we had like, it was kind of a revelation at the time that you could go into the studio and that there were, you can like punch in and, you can make your life easier in the studio than like going in there and just banging out the songs in one take. And so it was more like, okay, well, we're going to take advantage of the Pro Tools world to some degree. And, bands take that really far nowadays. I think it's actually maybe on a downswing now where stuff is starting to to sound a little bit more natural in metal productions. For a while there, it was like, everything sounded so gritted and so crazy that it didn't even sound like humans playing at all. But, we were kind of at the beginning of that curve and we were like, oh, like we could maybe write some more challenging parts because we can do a lot of takes of it at least.
Yeah, definitely. And then next up is level three. Three. What was that like kind of like going from level two to level three? Because I feel like those two albums are almost kind of like continue pick up after one another.
Hmm. Yeah, so on level two we toured a lot and we were picked up by Prosthetic Records and got a booking agent and all that stuff. So we did a lot of serious touring on level two. So the time we had to write level three, it was more like, okay, well, you're on a schedule now. You gotta like write this and get in the studio and get it done. So that was a challenge. Um, we had a long time in the studio to do it though, like probably longer than we'd ever had. Um, I don't know, it was different. It was a different producer. It was A.L. Levy produced it, and I think he was having us like listen to Muse and stuff a lot, which we were like, okay, we like this, but I don't know if you can hear that on the record at all. Like, it's definitely leaning more in the melodic direction, uh, and maybe we wanted to already kind of get away from the totally computer vibe and have the album sound a little bit more like a band playing and um a bit more natural while still being like a big over the top
Yeah.
production.
Yeah, and I know like the album and same thing with level two is both like a concept album. So what sort of like inspired like the concepts?
Um, on level two, we had the whole thing where there like was an actual video game that you could play that was it sunk up to the first couple. We did it for the first three songs of the album. We had wanted to do the whole album, but it was such an endeavor to do that that it never really came to fruition. I'd still like to see that happen someday. It seems like the kind of indie game development thing has gotten so big and it's so easy to do that stuff now that maybe it's a possibility in the future. But um, so there's like just a lot of themes of like the relationship between man and technology and, you know, the good and the bad of that. And I guess more so probably the bad of it because it's metal and all that stuff. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that like I look at those lyrics on level two, especially and now, and it's like, wow, I wasn't thinking of any of this stuff that has happened to the world with technology in the past, few years back then, but it seems like it's pertinent to it.
Yeah. And one of my favorite songs from Level 3 is sort of like Adrift Part 1 and 2. I love those songs. I was curious, like, what made you decide to do like a two-parter song?
Uh, I'm not sure.
Hmm.
It, that album is a little bit harder to remember what all the conceptual stuff is and what the like we didn't have the titles of the songs like became the titles of the songs like when we were like putting that doing like the album layout basically it's like oh it have these working titles it probably would have been called like E minor or like you know what I mean they were probably just working titles that were like the key of the song or like or like saying like so it's a little harder to remember what the thought of that was
Yeah.
um but
Yeah. And
the
then
whole
what
prog
you're
thing
saying.
right like
Yeah. And then you toured for a little bit, and then of course the band sort of like went on a hiatus. Like, like during that time, like what were you doing in the meantime?
I've basically right after we did our last tour I started uh interning with the producer who did level three A.L. Levy and his assistant John Douglas. So I started getting shown. I had already done some engineering in the past, and like I knew my way around Pro Tools a decent amount, but I started really learning how to like edit drums and prep sessions for like uh, real mixing and doing all that stuff. And then I started recording bands locally and regionally. So I just jumped full force into that, and I've been doing that for the last decade or whatever it's been. Um, I just kind of like was like, okay, like I kind of planned on doing that, but I didn't plan on Last Chance to Reason just being put on the back burner so soon. So I thought it'd be something like I'd build up over years and start once Last Chance to Reason had done the last tour and we Mike was joining the Contortionist. So we knew that we weren't doing anything for a while. I started interning for A.L. Levy, who had produced Level 3, and his assistant, John Douglas. Is this still working? You look like you're frozen.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I just started recording local bands and um I just had like a laptop and an audio interface and just started basically recording it anybody who would have me do it while I was doing editing for records for AL and actually I did some things like vocal tuning and stuff for Jamie King who had done the previous Last Chance to Reason record. So I had those relationships with those guys and they kind of knew I knew my way around Pro Tools a little bit. So they, took a chance on me helping them out with their records. Um, so I basically just dove in to recording and production like as hard as I could. And I still work with a lot of like local bands around Maine. But there's bands that I built this like, I guess like 2 or 3 years now. 3 years ago now, I built a studio that's next to my house where there's like living space and a big drum room and um, all of the stuff that you need to do albums. And I just had a band called Sunny Mondays here that they were here the whole month of October doing an album. Um, I've done most of Kayanashi's discography. Some of that I did when my studio was in my house, and like the last couple records I did out in this studio. They're on Equal Vision Records and they're like touring constantly, so they're doing really well. And I still do editing and kind of assistant engineering stuff for Jason Sukoff, who's like produced like Carnifex and Job for a Cowboy and um, Death Angel, Necrogoblicon. So I've worked on all those records in that capacity. And Mark Lewis does like Dying Fetus and Entheos and Havoc. He did the last Kill Switch Engage. He mixed that. I worked on that a little bit. So all of that stuff. So this has just been my full gig doing that. Sometimes I do sessions drums on stuff here too. If a band needs a drummer for their recording, or if they have, people will send me stuff and I'll do session drums. But yeah, kind of a little bit of anything that you do in the studio, I do here. And I
Cool.
did the last produced and engineered the last chance to reason stuff too.
Yeah, which lets me into sort of did those comeback singles being Digital Twin, Archons and Acolytes, False Walls, and the Divide. I think were all good songs. Is that like direction that you'll do for level four? Is those kind of songs just like completely standalone?
I think the original intention was to make like a full album that was kind of like that, but and we have a couple more songs that are very much in the vein of those songs that will eventually be released. Like they're all recorded instrumentally. We just need vocals on them. Um, but we've been working on music for, I don't know, since I've had this studio, we started writing more like we, wrote back in the day where it's us like actually playing together and writing the songs in the room together and not so much, you know, just recording them into Pro Tools and like writing by recording kind of, because that kind of became the norm for a while. Um, so we're just like jamming together in the studio to write, and we've written
Yeah,
um probably I think 4 songs like that. So the vibe of those is different. And I
yeah,
think that after these next couple we do that are more like the ones that you mentioned, like Digital Twin and False Walls and those songs, I think that maybe we'll do an EP or something that is this stuff that's uh I don't know what I'd say that's different about it. If it's like a little bit more raw, it's just a different vibe from us playing together in the room. It's maybe a little bit more stripped down.
it's nice. And so kind of also like in the end to sort of wrap things up, what's next for Last Chance to Reason? Is there like anything else you like to plug in terms of like tours and stuff, if you're allowed to say?
There's no touring plans at the moment. As people probably know, Mike is in the Contortionist, and people have been waiting for like a really long time for a new album from them. Where I don't have any secrets there. Like, I don't know when that's gonna actually be done. They'll probably tour whenever that comes out and is done. And if the right like opportunity came up, I think we're open to touring, but probably the next thing up for us is releasing those couple songs that are basically done and recorded instrumentally and just need vocals, and then getting this next group of songs done that are the ones that we've been writing that will probably fit together on an EP pretty well because it's like I said, it's a little bit of a different vibe.
Nice. But thank you, Evan, for this conversation. It's just any final words you want to say to the viewers that are watching us to close this out?
Uh, you know, Thanks for listening. If you've checked us out before and given us a listen, we appreciate it. And thanks for the
Awesome.
interview.
Anytime. So everybody, Evan Sammons from Last Chance to Reason. We'll see you next time.